So why don't we get started? And as usual, we'll start by just going around the virtual room so that people can briefly just say your name and where you're from. We'll do a little bit of news from around the hubs and other hub-related news. And then we have Laura Christopherson here from RENCI to talk about ImPACT, which is a tool they're developing there. So why don't I just start by giving people a chance to just say who they are and where they're from. And I'll just go around my Zoom screen here, starting with Alfonso.
Hi, everybody. This is Alfonso Torres from Utah State University.
And RENCI Da Vinci, I'm not going to do your name just right, but if you could introduce yourself.
Doesn't look like anybody's on from RENCI's Da Vinci.
Okay. Oh, it's a conference room. Got it. Okay.
I mean, I could be
They're
wrong.
just muted.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
that's me. I apologize. I was muted. This is Marion Merson. I'm in RENCI's Da Vinci conference room.
Hi.
And actually, I had a quick favor that I thought I had asked earlier. To help keep track of everybody that attends our presentations, it would be really helpful if you could rename yourself in the participants list on Zoom. To do that, you just open the participants list and hover over your name. And if you could add in your first and last name, that would do me a big favor.
Ben Town.
Yep, joining from South, I guess, and this is Cybersecurity Working Group.
And John McMullen.
Yeah, John McMullen from the Midwest Big Data Hub at University of Illinois.
And Endrit Mehta, if I've got that right.
Yes, you did. And hi, this is Endrit Mehta from the Center for Health Affairs. And my research on the data hubs has actually brought me here. So I'm just more interested in learning about all the hubs. That's why I joined today. Thank you.
Great. And Laura, I'm going to skip you because we're going to hear a lot from you in a minute. Melissa?
Hi, sorry, I was muted. Melissa Cragen, formerly of the Midwest Big Data Hub. I now work at SDSC.
And Jay Sri Sharma?
Jay Sri Sharma from George Mason University. I'm here because I saw this ImPACT toolkit and I want to learn more about it.
Jim?
Yeah, Jim Wogenbush, Director of Research Computing at the University of Minnesota, and also a co-chair of the CI Working Group and a co-PI on the Midwest Big Data Hub. Excuse me.
And then we'll do the other Jim, M.
Hi, it's Jim Myers. I'm independent, but working with a bunch of groups working with Dataverse and Clouder, so data-related things that have ties to ImPACT.
And Chu-Ming Chen?
Data Science Institute, University of Delaware.
And Jay Yang?
Jay Yen from Global Cybersecurity Institute at Rochester Institute of Technology. Thank you.
And let's see, there's one other person on the phone with a 319 area code. Is that someone dialed in with their screen or one more person?
Hi, my name is Lisa Spellman. I'm with SAE ITC and just very interested in this initiative, and so not able to join by Zoom, so listening in.
Great.
And John, this is Florence Hudson. Maybe you can't see my name. Is it?
Oh, you were in the upper left. Sorry, Florence. Go for it.
Okay, that's okay. This is Florence Hudson, and I'm a special advisor for the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub, and I also work for the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at Indiana University, so I'm involved with the Midwest and actually all the hubs.
And is there anyone else that I missed?
Lawrence, I think your name looks different because you have your video on and a piece of black tape over it.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Oh, it looks different. Okay, I'll turn off my video.
There, now your name is in lights.
Oh, wow. I don't have to rename myself, right? You see, does it look like Florence?
No, you're good.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for telling me. I appreciate it.
So just to just a couple of things from News Around the Hubs. Christine Kirkpatrick, who can't be here today from the West Hub, asked us to mention that the West Hub is seeking community input through an open to all online survey, which I will put in the chat window. So anyone who's okay responding to that would be much appreciated. And the first 500 respondents get swag. So that's an incentive. So the oops, wrong link, but I'll get there. Are there anyone else? So Jim, I might ask you to talk, give you a chance to say anything about the Midwest Hub, if there's something to say.
Since the executive director is here, John, maybe I'll kick that over to you.
All right.
Because there you'd have it actually from the source himself. So you know, John is new. I should just say, maybe by way of introduction, so that he didn't have to do this himself. I think this may be the first time that John is joining this call as the newly appointed executive director of the Midwest Big Data Hub. So I think that's true, and that's certainly welcome news that we have new leadership, and that he's doing a great job in terms of getting all the various activities that the Midwest Big Data Hub is doing organized and together. So with that perhaps introduction, maybe John, if you wanted to jump in and give any updates in terms of specifically what the Midwest Big Data Hub is up to.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate that introduction. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been with the Midwest Hub for past couple of years, working with Melissa when she was there as the ED. Just a couple of things to highlight for you that are coming up. We will have our All Hubs Summit coming up at the end of May, so hold the date for that. It's going to be the 26th through the 28th of May, hosted at Ohio State University through the TDAI folks there. We are also going to be launching our seed fund initiative in the next couple of months, so keep your eyes open for our call for proposals for that. I think that's it for now.
Thanks. Is there anyone from the South Hub who would like to say something? Hearing none, I might pass the baton to Florence from the Northeast Hub.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we nothing in particular to report. We're looking forward to the All Hubs effort. And one thing we are doing is we're kicking off the discussion, I think, with all the hubs about the marketing activity, marketing and communication. So I'm going to be interviewed for that to see how we can help with that. So if any of you have specific thoughts on that, feel free to send me an email. Or if you don't know my email, I can stick it in the chat. Just chat me up here on this as we look at how we can enhance the marketing communications effort for all of our hub work.
Thank you. And I may have missed, but I don't think I see anyone from the West Hub. But if now would be the time to speak up if you're there.
Well, that would be Melissa. She's at SDSC, so she's in the West Hub now.
Well, I think of Melissa as Florida bound. So Melissa, is there anything you can say about the West Hub today?
No, I think Christine passed on. I mean, let's see. We've got a number of fair-related activities going on through the SDSC office. I can't give you updates on the West Hub as a whole. I think that the survey is probably the most important general announcement there. And otherwise, from the SDSC office, we'll be leading a number of fair-related activities that'll be part of our West Hub grant for this year and next year. So that's probably it.
Okay. The next thing we're going to talk briefly about is the Open Storage Network, which is budding nationwide infrastructure aimed at making scientific data more easily accessible to the research community. Really in a couple of different modes. There are now data sets that are just hard to make visible because they're so large and so difficult to move. There are also many long-tail data sets which are small but belong to institutions that don't have the resources to make kind of a public repository readily visible. We're at an exciting time in a few different dimensions for the Open Storage Network as the OSN is filling with data from close to a half a dozen kind of early adopters are moving data in and making it available to people. At the risk of taking you by surprise, Melissa, since you're leading the use case effort, I might ask you to give just a few examples of the early users.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Happy to do that. Let's see. So we do, as John said, we do have a number of use cases where data have been moved on. Just to give a couple of examples, the Midwest Hub, part of the work at the Illinois, for the Illinois team of OSN, was that the Midwest Hub was also engaged in some additional ways, and that was to help drive some new use cases related specifically to data for machine learning applications. We ran across, at NCSA, ran across a group of, in one of the cancer research centers at Illinois, who had developed an important and highly annotated data set of infrared images related to cancer. And that data set was fairly ready to go and be made available. There are 3 different communities interested in this data set. And so the data are now available. It's about 10 terabytes or so of data. They're now available through the OSN and serving both the infrared imaging community, which is a fairly small community, but also then clinical and computational biomedical researchers in the cancer space. And now that data set, because it's highly annotated, is also available for work by people directly in the machine learning space. So that's just one example there. We also, at Illinois, have loaded up, so that's available through an S3 API. Through the Clouder interface, we have one of the critical zone observatory data sets available, and that's a hydrology data set, and that's available. The front end interface to that will be Clouder. We have a fairly significant chunk of data from one of the big NASA instruments that's now available. I won't speak too much about that, but I can post some information, links to that. There was a big presentation at AGU on that data, but that's about 150 terabytes of data from this NASA instrument. It's integrated from several different, instruments from one satellite. We've also now got the data from BIGDATA, which is oceans data. The BIGDATA group needed a place to be able to test their architecture for object store for their entire data set, data collection. So they've got a bucket now on OSN that they can begin to do testing of their new architecture related to both I/O and calls into the data set for queries. So they're testing that there. And then on the Northeast pod, which John oversees. The Northeast Pod has some also ocean physics data coming from other NASA instruments. And the front end on that will be an IRODS front end. So we're testing a whole number of user interfaces and I/O mechanisms. And that's just a sampling there. We've got another 3 or 4 data use cases that are going to be loaded up in the near term. So that's a handful of examples there of different disciplinary and project-based data sets that are now available for both public use and internal testing, so that then they can be opened up for public use in the not too distant future.
I think Alex Zolay, who's the PI, often points out that the open storage network is 90% social experiment and 10% technology experiment. It's been kind of fascinating and fun to see engineers and data scientists work across 5 different sites to bring up a fairly complex piece of technology, and it's a lot of fun to see it start to work and start to deliver.
So John, I might just add one more comment, just because there are folks on the call that might actually get asked this question, because we're getting it regularly, and that is, what's the status of OSN? What are the next steps? Do you perceive moving forward? Because this is a pilot. Our active funding ends in June. We are anticipating putting in a no-cost extension to wrap up some work that we can do within the constraints of our current budget. But we are also in the process of starting to scale up or starting to put together what would be a proposal to scale up the OSN. So we're thinking about various ways that we will take what we're doing now, think about some bridge work that needs to happen, and then be able to put in a proposal to scale the OSN out. I can't answer the question about what the size of that scale out will be right now. We've got a couple different sort of pathways we're considering. So whether, for example, we move to 30 petabytes or 50 petabytes, those are, they will take different kinds of efforts to be able to pick one of those pathways. And I guess the other piece I would add, so yes, we're moving forward, we're continuing to grow, we're planning on the next phase proposal. Secondly, we are aware and also providing letters of collaboration already for people putting in, or groups putting in, proposals to NSF in different kinds of programs to join the OSN network, either by requesting funds for a pod. That's one of the storage nodes at an institution. So requesting pod funding to be able to link into the network, or to purchase storage that would come into a standing pod. So there are proposals out and going into NSF now to continue to add to the network and grow the collaborative network as well.
And if you're interested in either becoming an OSN site or moving data into the OSN, feel free to send an email to Melissa or to me or Christine. Always love to hear from you. So just one other bit of business before we move on to our talk for today. As you know, we schedule a talk of interest every month that focuses either on a tool for managing or collecting or analyzing large data sets, such as the one that we're about to hear about, or somebody who's doing something interesting and impactful with large amounts of data, so that they can talk about the kind of user and the application side of the big data space. This is the point in the meeting where we solicit, either via the chat, if that helps, or just you can shout it out, areas of interest or potential speakers of interest. Any thoughts or ideas from the group that's on the phone?
And John, you said this is for the March call?
pretty much let's see, we stand down during the summer, but this could be March, April, May, or June.
We actually have April and May presenters on the calendar at this point, so it's really just March that's open.
Oh, thank you for, that's why you're on the call. Thank you for correcting.
You're welcome.
So one thought, and we have to see where we are on it, is that Trusted CI, the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which I also work for, is working with the 4 big data hubs to create a trustworthy data working group. And we had the kickoff call, I think like on Monday. And we're putting together a survey vehicle that we will send out, hopefully through the hubs, to science projects, like some of y'all on the phone, to answer questions about what are some of the, the concerns you have about keeping your data trustworthy. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the, practices you have on what you're doing? What help do you wish you still had? So we're hoping we can get it ready to send out in March, the survey. So I could ask Jim Basney if he thinks it would be interesting to talk about it on the March 6th call.
Go for it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or ideas? Let's move on then. Laura Christopherson is presenting on behalf of Ilya Baldwin on the ImPACT project, Infrastructure for Privacy-Assisted Computations. I'm personally taken by this project in that there are so many security and sensitive data-oriented projects that focus on protecting the data, and so few that work on making it straightforward to protect the data and manage access. So this is at least to me a pretty fun talk, and I will not attempt to steal any thunder whatsoever. I'll just hand the mic over to Laura.
Hi. I just want to thank you all for having me, and give Ilya's apologies for not being able to be here. I spoke with him to see how he wanted me to present this information to you, and I asked Marion to send out those links earlier. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at them, but Ilya wants me to have you guys look at the video that we've created. It's an animation. It's a non-technical introduction to ImPACT. So I will show you the video. Let me see, where is it? Here we go. And
researchers today face many challenges largely around complying with various policies and requirements on data access and use. This is most especially the case for research projects using sensitive data. Data, for example, that may contain personally identifiable information, or PII, and that must be specially guarded to protect the identities of the people that are described in the data. Many researchers work in teams that cross institutions and disciplines, which may add another layer of complexity to the research process. For example, a research team may have to comply with data use policies and technological constraints on the protection of that data that differ between institutions and discipline. ImPACT, Infrastructure for Privacy-Assured Computations, is a project that aims to simplify these complexities and ease the research process so researchers can be free to focus more fully on their research. Specifically, ImPACT's goal is to support collaborative, multi-institutional analysis of data, ensuring its protection and the satisfaction of policies and agreements governing its use. To explain ImPACT better, let's introduce some of the key players.
Hi, I have data that I'd like to share with researchers. I want to make it discoverable without compromising its privacy. How do I ensure that only those researchers who comply with my policies are granted access?
I'm a researcher, and for my next project, I've been wanting to work with a particular set of data that is sensitive and has some strict policies around its use. I like to get access to it without delay. I don't want to violate data provider policies, and I will need a secure place to do my analysis to avoid the risk of data leakage.
I am staff in the university's Institutional Review Board, or IRB. My role is to ensure that research is conducted in an ethical fashion and that the subjects of the research projects are protected.
I work in University Information Technology Services. My colleagues and I would like to be able to quickly create secure analysis environments for researchers and make them easily customizable to fit their needs. We also need to ensure researchers follow university information security policies.
That's great, everyone. Now we can move on to showing how ImPACT works.
Wait, you forgot about me.
What? Oh, sorry, I did forget about you. Forgive me, Data. You are a very special player in this story. Let me introduce Data.
Hi, everyone. I am Data. I contain all kinds of information that should not be disclosed to just anyone. My data provider and I are hoping to find a great researcher who will protect me and analyze me to find all kinds of interesting insights. I think I have a lot to say, and I'm hoping ImPACT will make it possible for me to do that while keeping me safe and secure.
Well, Data, let's see what ImPACT can do.
I'm pretty fond of Data, and I'd like her to stay with me, but I'd like other researchers to have the opportunity to discover her. I'm not sure how to do that. Most data repositories want you to keep a copy of the data with them.
With ImPACT, you can keep data safe and secure on your servers, but create a listing for her in Dataverse, a data repository. The listing would show all the metadata, or data about data, describing data, but none of her actual details. Just download and install TRSA, the Trusted Remote Storage Agent. It will index data, harvesting any metadata, and create that listing for you on Dataverse. All the while, data will be safe and sound with you, data provider.
I also have some policies on how I would like a researcher to use data. If they can satisfy these policies, then I will consider releasing data to them. For example, the researcher I trust with data must agree not to share her with anyone else.
And that's where I come in, data provider. I am the Notary Service in ImPACT. I work with you to store all your policies and keep an audit trail of what all the different players in the story need to do to satisfy their agreements. For example, if you want a policy that states researchers shouldn't share data with others, you can register that with me. And when researchers promise to adhere to that policy, I will note it in my log with a date and a signature. Consider me your digital witness.
So I get to see a list of all of my policies and verify if they've been attested to before I agree to release data?
That's right. You keep track of all that with me.
Fantastic. Let's get started.
Now that data is listed in Dataverse and all the policies surrounding her access and use are registered in Notary Service, let's see what happens next.
Remember me? I had my eye on a data set that I'd like to use in my next study. Today I was browsing through Dataverse and data caught my eye. She's perfect for my study. Ordinarily, it takes quite a bit of time to obtain permission to use a data set because of all the back and forth through email and phone calls and all the paperwork. But with ImPACT,
I think we lost the audio from the video.
You must
There we
satisfy
go.
these policies so that her data provider will feel comfortable releasing her to you. You can formalize your agreement to those policies with me. Wait a moment, please. I have a part to play in this as well. I need to make sure that the researcher submits a proposal to my office outlining her intentions with data. Data contains some sensitive information, and I need to be part of ensuring she is adequately protected. Of course, IOB, we can list your requirements as well and keep track when the researcher submits the proposal and when you have made your determination. I'm sure the data provider will be interested to track that process on his end as well.
Yes, I would. Thanks for making this all so transparent.
I want to make sure I do all the right things by data. So I need a secure work environment in which to conduct my analysis. I don't want any of data to leak out and be used in ways I haven't agreed to.
That's where I come in. I need to create a protected data enclave for you to work in. It's kind of like a virtual fortress. It's something you promised in the IRB proposal and something that will make data provider feel more comfortable with sharing data with you.
protected data enclave? That's a mouthful. What is a protected data enclave really?
Well, it's a remote desktop presented to you on your computer through a browser window. It's invisible to others on the internet. Access is restricted to you and only those collaborators that have been approved through the Notary Service, and login is encrypted. Any analysis software I install in the Enclave will have been rigorously tested to ensure it doesn't make the Enclave vulnerable to attack.
Wow, that sounds perfect. Nice and cozy, right, Data? Yep, that sounds good to me. I'd like to use RStudio and MATLAB. That okay?
We'll get it ready for you.
And be sure to sign off on your work when you're done.
Absolutely. Well, Data, it looks like everything is up to snuff. Everything is in place for your safe and secure transfer to the Enclave. Are you ready to go?
Are we sure I will be well guarded?
Yes, Data. We've reviewed the researcher's IRB proposal, and she's been exempted. It's all in Notary Service.
I've built the Enclave to specification. I've tested it and the package analysis software thoroughly. You are not at risk as far as I'm concerned, and I've attested to that fact in Notary Service.
Data, I've done my part as well. I've signed off on all my promises in Notary Service. I'm excited to analyze you and see what we can learn together. Great!
So, you ready to go, Data?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, Data. Remember, you'll always be with me on my servers, but now a well-guarded copy of you will exist in the Enclave with the researcher. Good luck!
Thanks, everyone. Now to sum up, ImPACT strives to give researchers, data providers, ethic boards, and infrastructure providers automated discovery workflow, compliance tracking, rapid creation of secure infrastructure, and federated identity management. For more information, visit cyberimpact.us.
Okay, so can everybody still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So ImPACT, infrastructure for privacy-assured computations. Just being a little silly with the voice. So
President Trump has been acquitted, but the fight over impeachment appears far from over. A triumphant Trump taking a major victory lap at the national.
That's what you get for leaving YouTube up. So this is sort of a diagram, a different way to sort of view what was discussed in the video, although the diagram includes some components that are not covered in the video. So for example, the different actors would be the data provider, the infrastructure provider, anything that you might want to call institutional governance or IRB, as well as the researcher, the most important one. So the idea is that a data provider can have data that they own, that they keep on their server, that maybe they don't want to really release out to the world just yet. And they can, but they want to list it on Dataverse down here. And they want to do that where they have the listing, but are able to keep their data on their own servers under their own protection. And so the component here, TRSA, Trusted Remote Storage Agent, was developed in conjunction with Dataverse and at Odom Institute at UNC. And what this is the data provider can download it essentially and install it on their own server where they're hosting their data. And what it will do is index their data and then provide them with a way to list their data, but none of the secret bits on Dataverse. And then there are, we talked about in the video, Notary Service. Behind Notary Service is Safe and Presidio. And these three things are tied together. Basically what Notary Service is it's like an auditor or a notary service, where it basically keeps track of everything that's going on in this larger system. So for example, the data provider may have policies about how people can use his or her data. For instance, they may say, okay, well, you can, you must, I'm going to give it to you unde-identified. You're going to have to de-identify it in order to use it. And I need assurances that you're going to keep it on a lockdown server and that you're not going to share it with people that are not on your project. So the data provider will have that kind of information in human readable policies, stuff that we all understand when we just take a look at it. Well, the data provider will then need to put those policies in more of a machine readable form in Notary Service. And there's more intricacies with that we can of course discuss offline if you're more interested in that. And then SAFE is this logic engine that sits behind Notary Service. And what it does is it helps sort of manage the way that Notary Service governs the approval or attestation to the various policies that the data provider may set up. Presidio, and the reason a wall was chosen is because that's exactly what it is. It's like a gatekeeper, and it ultimately determines whether or not a person can have access to the data provider's data. So theoretically, a data provider would then have Notary Service, SAFE, and Presidio installed on his own servers, and they would work together to protect the data and only allow its use by other folks, such as the researcher, once the researcher has attested to agreed that they're going to follow through on various policies. Yes, I will de-identify the data. No, I will not share it with people outside of my project. And Notary Service will just basically keep a record of that. So it's like it keeps like digital signatures, for lack of a better way to put it, and the date and the time of when these agreements were made. Now, other actors in the system, such as an infrastructure provider or the IRB, can also play a role in this. So for instance, what was first sort of discussed was this idea of an enclave, a secure enclave. And that is another component of ImPACT, which is separate. It was originally developed at Duke University, and it has this groovy pro console front end, which allows it to show you essentially a VM in a browser window, and that enclave where you can go and have your data, that private data downloaded into here. It's secured, and only you and whoever you have noticed, who you've listed in Notary Services, being able to have access to the data that the data provider said is okay via Notary Service. Only those folks can gain access to the enclave, and they can go in there and they can use different types of secured analysis software that you might request. So for instance, in the animation, the researcher said, oh, I'd really like to use MATLAB and I think it was R. So if you wanted that, part of this, the ImPACT process is that those kinds of analysis software would be securely packaged and then made available in the infrastructure in this enclave for you to then use and with the data and to conduct your research. And the whole point of this is to keep any data from exfiltrating in ways you did not want. And then of course there's, the infrastructure provider might be the one that then says, oh, okay, I created this enclave to specification. Whatever those specifications were might have been laid out by the data provider, such as that it needs to be password protected. It needs to, login needs to be encrypted. You've got to use this, that, or the other, and so forth and so on. So the infrastructure provider can go into Notary Service and say, okay, for this project, and this can be like an IT person at your university, or it could even be a cloud service provider, somebody like Amazon. Okay, I went in and I created this enclave, and I've made it according to the specifications of the data provider as set down in the policies that are in Notary Service. IRB can then say, okay, I've gone into Notary Service, and I see that I need to look at the IRB proposal, and which is basically a set of policies that the researcher will have agreed to. So those can be listed in Notary Service, and they can say, yes, I've reviewed this, I've exempted this person, let's say, and so they may move forward with their research. So, no, it's not moving. There we go. So Ilya wanted me to point out that this is, it's like a cafeteria style. So for instance, the first thing is the pro console, the enclave. That's one piece, and it provides protected a location, a virtual location for folks to conduct protected data analysis. Then there is this piece, which I said these three go together, Notary Service Safe and Presidio. And their goal is to help negotiate and log data use agreement type policies and automate access to protected data that is stored on the data provider's own servers. And the last piece is the Dataverse TRSA piece, because TRSA, of course, is accessible via Dataverse. What this does is allows you to have a nice, secure way to list your data and offer it up for discovery. So I'm going to stop there and see if any of this was unclear. Please ask me questions if any of it did not make sense.
I think it's very interesting. This is Florence. Is it available now?
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you asked that, because one of the reasons why I think Shannon had asked if we would be interested in talking to you all is because we would really love to get some early adopters who will give us feedback, who will use it and implement it and say, I don't like this piece, but this piece works real well for us. We'd like to put it into practice and see how folks are using it, see how folks would use it. We already do have some folks using it right now, but we want to expand that list. That also means that we, if you are interested in learning more, could provide a more detailed, more technical demo of the different components so you could see them in action and judge for yourself if it were something that you wanted to try to integrate.
Laura, this is Jim Wogenbush. Thanks for your presentation. I was just trying to get a sense of, as a follow-up to that answer, are the people using it in sort of beta use, or given, the sensitivity around the data, it wasn't really clear to me whether this is in production or whether they're whether it's just in sort of proof of concept stage.
That's a wonderful question. And although we do not use the term proof of concept, we use a corollary. What we consider it to be in now is the minimal viable product stage. It's like proof of concept. So basically what that means is we've gotten it to a point where, yeah, I guess you could call it a beta. I guess we could use that as a synonym, where it's a working, functioning entity that can be adopted and used. The folks that are using it now are testing it out more so than actually using any real sensitive data as of yet. So for example, we have a faculty member at UNC who's a math professor, and he also works with a sociology professor over at Duke, and they are currently using it, but they are using simulated data right now in it, because we're getting them to, they have been testing predominantly the actual Enclave piece. And we've also got trusted CIs, folks mentioned that earlier, and they're using it, but they're also using it from the standpoint of trying to poke holes in it and make sure it's what we want it to be in terms of security. So they're not, so there's folks using it, but for different reasons. And we'd love to have other folks. We're talking to research computing at UNC about them possibly offering a use, and John Crabtree, who is one of the PIs on the project for ODM. So he's in charge of the TRSA and Dataverse, and he couldn't be here today either. He's looking for a quote unquote use case group at the university that might be willing to work with us on an instantiation through research computing.
Thanks. Maybe one other question is, what's the sort of business model for this? And sort of, I guess, is there a sharp target audience, or is it more broad?
That's an interesting question. So as far as audience is concerned, the grant was actually written to focus on social scientists and their needs. And that would include also So for example, we've also been giving demos and talking to and gathering requirements from people at the business school, for example, or in the School of Journalism. So in the business school, the folks there, they may not necessarily have sensitive data per se, but they may have commercial data, data that has commercial value, and so they don't really want it to be leaked out. So the original intent of this was to focus on an audience that does work more in the social sciences, that may work with data that would contain personally identifying information, which you run into a lot in the social sciences, but also might have other kinds of uses for data, such as it being commercial. We are also working, though we've expanded a little bit, and we're working with another project at RENCI called the Data Translator Project, and they work with biomedical data. And so we're working on aspects of that with them. So at this point in time, we feel it's kind of open. We want to get folks to test it, although the original use for it was intended for social scientists. And then as far as a business model, if you're talking about sort of future steps, what we want to do is get folks in the next few months or so on board and using this, and we want to gather the information we need to know how to improve it. And we want to make sure that the way we spend the remaining grant money is so that we are attending to whatever the needs of those folks are that we haven't so far met within the system as it currently is in its minimal viable product stage. Did that answer your question?
Mostly, I guess, are there longer term visions that this would eventually become a commercial product and be self-sustaining under some license sort of agreement?
That I cannot answer, I'm afraid. That would be a question for Ilya. And I won't even hazard a guess answer at that because I might totally screw up the answer to that.
Or in the alternative, is there plans for making it open source?
Oh, it pretty much is open source because, well, actually, I cannot say for certain if John Crabtree would consider TRSA open source. But the code for Presidio, SAFE, and Notary Service is something that ultimately would have to be given over to the data provider if the data provider wanted to use it. Proconsul is, again, one of the things that we've done is we've included some rather detailed instructions on how to implement each of these components. So for example, Don Sizemore, who works with John Crabtree over at the Odom Institute, is the one who's been sort of in charge of creating some of these enclaves for UNC folks. And so basically what he's done is created a lot of helpful information about, these are the different components you're going to need to add, and here's how you're going to have to use it. So it is already open source.
That include the ability to modify it for example, non-social science applications if needed?
I don't see why there would be a problem with that. To know the answer for sure, again, I'd have to defer that one to Ilya, but I can't imagine he would have a problem with that.
Cool.
Laura, this is Melissa Cragen. Thanks for your presentation. I watched the video the other day, and so I'm intrigued by a number of by the system here as a whole, but also by a couple of the components. And I'm wondering, have there been conversations about the roles and responsibilities for, and whether this fits or not into the tool or the service for checking compliance? So who's responsible for actually, the Notary Service holds the data use signature, data user signature. But are there discussions happening about who has access to that Notary Service to check compliance and things like that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that is one of the things that makes this rather complex, is because the goal is to make something like Notary Service that can then be useful and streamline the process and make it more automated for all of the different actors. And so what that would ultimately involve is we need to get folks who are on all, we would need to get a test use case kind of scenario where we had actors from all of these to work with the system and to let us know if they think it's feasible for example, for their larger institutions. So as I said, we were trying to work with research computing over in the ITS, Information Technology Services at UNC. And, but that, so far, what we're looking at is more this side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to know, is this something that IRB could use as well at UNC? And how would we, because right now, the way it works, Notary Service could grant access to all these different roles. And there's a log, basically, it's a log of who has agreed to what throughout this research approval and data use process. And it would be good if we could see how all that would interact. And I think I've lost the flow of what I was going to say in answer to your question. So tell me what I haven't answered.
No, I think I get a sense for where y'all are and what's happening with it. So, yeah, thanks. I think that's okay for me.
It's a really good point, because that whole level is because it is intended to satisfy all these different roles' needs. That particular subject is quite complex.
Hi, Laura. This is John Goodhue. One of the challenges with sensitive data is liability. And I'm guessing you thought through kind of the liability exposures for someone who's operating either a service like this in total or one of the components. I'd be curious to hear how you're thinking about it.
That's also a good question. Very similar. I was also thinking about that when I was trying to answer the earlier question. So what Notary Service does is Notary Service basically keeps a log or a record of all the agreements made, and the date and the time and who agreed to what. But it doesn't actually provide any means for, let's say, the data provider to then find out if the researcher has actually de-identified the data, to use the example I was using before. So it's based on a trust system. Basically, the researcher agrees that he will de-identify the data, and he makes that agreement in Notary Service, and then the data provider releases it based on trusting that the researcher will actually do what the researcher says in Notary Service. The advantage of Notary Service, because that seems like, well, we're in the same boat we were before. The advantage of Notary Service is that it is a digital record. You now have a record that says the researcher agreed to this. So if the researcher flakes out on this, the data provider can at least say, look, here it is in Notary Service. This is what you agreed to. You are now breaching what you said earlier you would do. But yeah, if you wanted to add more of a stronger consequence sort of aspect to it, more at the organizational level, the institution level, that would probably need to be a policy decision among the institution's policymakers on how you would want to enforce anything. Did that answer your question?
Let's see. I'll answer by saying we are close to the top of the hour, so I'll stop there. And I was wondering, Marion, whether you might just say a little bit about the first. Thank you. I was looking forward to this, and it's just a remarkable thing that you're doing. So I'll leave you with that. And Marion, could you spend just a minute talking about upcoming presentations?
Oh, can I say one thing before I go?
You certainly may.
Please let Marion know if you are interested in either having a more detailed, more technical demo that will go through all the different components and explain what you would need to set them up and try them out. And let her also know if you're interested in trying any of this we would love to talk with any of you more about how we can make this useful for you. That's all I have. Thanks.